Hey, Tourpreneurs, it's Mitch Bach, and just a quick note before we begin today's episode. Tourpreneur is currently sponsored by Google. We're thankful for their support of our community, and we are offering with them a completely free course helping you unlock the power and potential of Google's Things to Do program, which is specifically helping tour operators add their tours to Google in new ways that gives you new exposure and more direct bookings. To learn more, go to tourpreneur.com/Google. And as always, show notes, more resources, links to our newsletter, our business coaching community, and so much more are available on tourpreneur.com. Now to the episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tourpreneur. I am Mitch Bach, and we are back for part 2 of my interview with Akila McConnell of Unexpected Atlanta. Akila is one of the most creative and ambitious tour operators that I know, and in this second part of our interview, she continues to share pure gold with our community. It may actually sound like a little bit of a throwback of an episode because we're going to start by talking about her success in virtual tours and food boxes. Even though those were often something played around with during the pandemic, Akila has turned those channels into 75% of her business in the case of virtual tours and shipped over 20,000 experience boxes last year. She is a firm believer that you should always be pivoting, finding gaps in the market, seizing the first mover advantage, as she calls it in our last episode, and always evolving as a business. And so in this episode, we are going to continue to talk everything from profit margins to virtual tours to working in the corporate market to food boxes, diversity, and everything in between, especially looking at the way in which she rebranded her company and has found certain ways of seizing what she calls the zone of genius of herself, of her team, to create a company that is truly special and also successful. So without further ado, here is part 2 of my interview with Akila. And we talked for so long that we couldn't even fit everything into this episode. And so for Tourpreneur Plus members, you will receive an extra 35 minutes of discussion on guide training and software that she recommends and everything else. So make sure you check out Tourpreneur Plus on tourpreneur.com. And here's Akila. I want to switch into the topic of 2020. 2021, otherwise known as the COVID-19 pandemic. I see 3 things that happened in your business. 1, a shift to virtual, a shift also to food tour boxes or experience boxes, and 3, a rebrand of your business, maybe as a result of those first 2. And so could we start with your foray into the virtual world and what that has meant for your business and what your strategy has been, what your focus has been, what you've thought about that adventure?
Virtual is amazing. So our virtual business is currently the biggest part of our business.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again, please?
Yeah, our virtual business is the biggest part of our business. And we actually, to just give you a really quick look at this. So right now, our virtual business is about 70% of our total revenue. And we have grown 10x since pre-pandemic, largely because of our virtual business. So a little bit about what we do on the virtual side, and this is really where that creativity and that first mover advantage is so huge, is, right out of the gate, I mean, within a week after the pandemic hit, we said, well, we need to find a way to keep our guides all employed. And we moved into the virtual space, kind of doing the same thing that we were already doing, which is telling stories that we believe matter, and really focusing on corporate entities. We found it to be difficult to sell to individuals in the virtual space, but every company was going remote. So we were like, well, this is an obvious, like just really easy market.
Did
Um,
you try B2C sales and it just
we
quickly
did.
was
We
harder
did.
than you thought?
Yeah, we tried B2C sales for about, I would say maybe 3 months. And it was hard to get the B2C sales, and just honestly not worth it. It was way better shifting into B2B. And so we just kind of, and this is, again, where we're not worried about killing our babies. We
Mhm.
build things and we're like, this isn't working, this isn't making money, and it goes to the graveyard. And so we had created some B2C products, and it just didn't work. Like we didn't feel like we were making sufficient money, so we just sent them to a graveyard. No worries. Um, so we really focus on B2B, and our focus is remote team building. I think our big differentiator and the reason why we are so successful is the same reason why we are successful with our in-person tours, is that we really create these super engaging events that people can't get enough of. And so right now, I mean, in the past 2 years, we've become one of the primary suppliers for Google's DEI focused events, for Intel, for IBM, for the Gates Foundation. So all these huge companies that you can think of, as well as many companies that you probably don't know, we're providing both fun team building as well as DI focused remote team building events for them. And we see this area as one that is only going to continue to grow, as more and more companies are finding that they have to be remote, that it is too, um, that they are losing out on very good personnel because they're telling people there to go back into the office.
So just to be clear, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Correct.
This is a field that has existed obviously before the pandemic, but it probably is fair to say it exploded during the pandemic. There were key events, especially in the United States, that drew a very focused laser attention on that space. And suddenly there were a lot of initiatives, there were a lot of budgets that were allocated to that very, very, very quickly in a very different way than might be allocated to incentive trips, virtual incentive trips, or virtual team building exercises. And so did you see that as an opportunity to kind of reimagine what a virtual tour experience looks like, but in a different context, a different corporate team, a different budget, a different way of thinking about what a virtual tourism experience was?
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is maybe a little bit about also our brand, is that our ethos has, I mean, as you can tell, as we've been talking, our ethos has always been to tell stories associated with, um, disenfranchised, minority, and stories that are not usually told. So we were doing this in person, and it's amazing to me to see the evolution, because now I've been in business for 7 years. When we started, um, and I would tell people, like, look, we're doing these civil rights focused tours. People were like, I don't get it. Like, why are you going to do these? Like, what is the purpose? Why? Like, nobody wants these, blah, 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 blah. And now, I mean, people are banging on our door trying to get onto our experience. So absolutely, the Black Lives Matter movement has played a huge role in this. But I also hope, and maybe this is some naivety here, um, that it is, as generations are growing and we are seeing Gen Z entering the market. Um, Gen Z in particular is very interested in a focus on diversity. This is very important to Gen Z in picking a corporate environment. And so companies are responding. And this is, again, why I believe that there is no such thing as pivoting for an entrepreneur. It is just finding the next space, and the next evolution of business. And so when we moved into virtual, actually, the first three products that we built out when our team got together, we said, product number one that we're going to build is we're going to build a street art product that is going to be kind of fun, easy, lightweight for people to enjoy. Product number two is going to be Juneteenth. This is, again, 3 years ago, when a lot of people didn't know what Juneteenth was. Juneteenth had not yet been made a federal holiday. And we were having to explain to our customers what Juneteenth was. We still got a lot of interest in Juneteenth. Coca-Cola was one of the first companies who said, hey, like, we really need a Juneteenth virtual experience. And we have continued to develop that Juneteenth experience. This year, we ran 93 Juneteenth virtual events in 1.5 weeks. We had 3 teams running it, and we were literally running it every hour, with like half-hour breaks among the 3 teams. And we, despite that, because we actually tripled, because last year we sold 30, and I was like, 90, we're never going to fill this. This is plenty. Despite doing 3x, we ran out of slots. And so next year, I think we're probably going to sell more like 180 or maybe 270 Juneteenth events in a week and a half. So it's a massive market, that, again, that first mover advantage is huge, because we've been doing this. And, right now we're the leader in Juneteenth events. Same thing with Pride. Pride, we've been doing this. Black History Month. I mean, like, so these are just events that companies just come to us because they know that we have them. And we're working on building new DEI events. Like, I don't know if you can see behind me, I've got my stuff on,
Don't
Hispanic.
hide it. People are going to be zooming into that video,
Yeah.
saying,
Well,
"What's he up to next?"
yeah. So, I mean, next is Hispanic Heritage Month and Latinx. So, so there's always something else that we're working on in this space.
It's a testament to your confidence in the prime mover advantage that you are incredibly generous in even sharing it right now, because you're saying, we're doing this, and we're doing it because we placed a bet, but you also had a vision. You had a bet and a vision. In other words, the success came from a risk, and the risk was doing a Juneteenth event before every single American news outlet was talking about Juneteenth. And you had that first believer, which happened to be Coca-Cola, which helps definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
you, and that's fine. I mean, of course, you've got to have that believer, and you were lucky to have that. But that luck came because you had that vision first, and you weren't afraid to be different than the way everybody else was running and thinking about their virtual tours.
Yeah, and I think this is, and obviously you don't have to do DEI events. You might see the vision is axe throwing and, physical movement.
DEIA.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's always something out there that there's a gap that needs to be filled. And only what your team's passion is in filling that gap. But looking for those gaps is so critical. And, now we're 3 years ahead of the game, right? And we're seeing companies now coming and saying, "Oh, we're going to build DI events," and I'm like, "Look, like, this is really hard. I mean, number one, we've been doing this, I mean, 7 years now, we've been building DEI events in the in-person space, and now 3 years in the virtual space. So it's that being the first one, taking that risk, believing in yourself, believing in your team, and then being willing to throw away anything that just doesn't work. To me, that's just a template to a successful business. And it's one that, yes, you had to be a little bit courageous and you had to be willing to take risks. But you also wake up in the morning and you know that your business is going to be fun and a challenge to work in.
I think when someone visits your website, it's a masterclass in website design.
Oh, thank you.
It's incredibly appealing. I've actually also watched it over the years develop and evolve. And one of the things that still is on there and still is prominent, which I'm guessing means it's still active in your life, is food tour boxes or
Yeah.
experience boxes. Since
Hmm.
I think some of your boxes actually don't involve a terrible amount of food. And so that was something that came on hot and heavy at the beginning of the pandemic. It isn't necessarily something that shows up in our community feed every day, but I'm wondering what your experience has been with that and what your outlook is for it.
Yeah, so I mean, so as part of our virtual experiences, we sell experience boxes. We sell a lot of boxes. We actually have a warehouse now where we build and sell boxes. I think last year we sold something like 20,000 boxes or something like that. It's a lot of boxes. There's a steady stream of boxes entering and leaving the warehouse.
I'm just glad it's not in your house.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it started at my house actually. So our first build space was, I have a little guest bedroom that is over here, and we cleared out the guest bedroom and we were building it. And we were there until the very moment where I was like, we have no space. There are Uline boxes coming every day to my house, giant boxes of crinkle paper. Like, we can no longer do this. And so,
This is affecting my marriage.
yeah, it truly was. My poor husband, like, my kids were like constantly like, Mom, there's a box for you. I was like, yes, I know. And so, so we moved into the warehouse space, which has been really huge. But, we waited until the very last moment in order to do that. But we also sell on Amazon. So that's another kind of revenue source that we do, because we already have the boxes, we have the warehouse space. And again, I was looking for gaps. So we looked in Amazon and we were like, look, there's a huge gap here where there are no boxes, no gift boxes focused on female empowerment. There's a whole lot of boxes focused on spa stuff for women. But if you are, excuse my language here, but if you are a badass woman, maybe you don't want to do your nails. Maybe you really want, a mug that
You want to
makes you,
become a Supreme Court
you
justice.
want to be a Supreme Court justice, or you want to rock the world with your company. For us, we looked at it and we're like, we're a women-owned business. We've got 11 women and one man on our team, and our man proudly states that he is a feminist. And so for all of us, we were like, look, like,
He
why
knows his audience.
yeah, I mean, and he's amazing. So.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
But for all of us, we're like, look, like, here's a gap. We can fill this gap. And this is again like going back to our very early part of our discussion. I like the very first thing that I did was I hired an attorney to help us trademark the name Unexpected Gifts, because I wanted this to be something where we could spin off. The other aspect that I think about associated with entrepreneurship is, yes, you want to take risks. Yes, you want to build something amazing, but you also have to think about what is your long-term goal, and are you planning on exiting? Because I don't want to be doing this when I'm 80 years old or 70 years old or maybe even 60 years old. At some point I want to figure out the exit. And I want to create as many streams in the business that make sense, that will be valuable streams that we could sell. And it made sense to me. I was like, look, like, this is just a smart business move where we've again identified a gap, first mover in it. And so that's kind of like a nice little side business that we've got going. That is a very easy lift on our part because we're already building boxes and we just ship them out to Amazon and sell them.
So you're talking about your brand, Unexpected Gifts, Unexpected Atlanta, but you started out as Atlanta Food Tours.
Yeah, Atlanta Food Walks, actually. Yeah.
Atlanta Food Walks.
Yeah.
What was your experience or your journey in rebranding yourself, and why?
So we rebranded actually even pre-pandemic. So I originally, when I started the company, I had a lot of people tell me, well, you want to get a really great SEO name, something that people are going to search for, etc. And so Atlanta Food Walks, Atlanta Food Tours wasn't available. Atlanta Food Walks, that made sense. I was like, okay, great. And the problem with a really great SEO name is that it is a really forgettable name. And so about a year and a half in, we were creating these amazing experiences, but we saw that our food tour reviews were getting mixed with other companies' food tour reviews on TripAdvisor because people literally could not differentiate our name from others. And I see this happen all the time. If you are, Timbuktu food tour and somebody else's food tour Timbuktu and somebody else's food walk Timbuktu, people don't know. It's just too hard. And so we actually hired a brand advisor, which is again like one of those things where yes, you got to spend some money, but it was very worth it. And he helped us kind of think about what was important to us. And we did a number of exercises associated with our brand. By the way, if you are ever looking for branding, this is not the advisor that we use, but as a free resource, I highly, highly recommend Pia Silva, Pia, and then her last name is Silva. She has both blogs, Forbes articles, and podcasts, as well as like YouTube videos all about branding. You can buy her book and basically do all the stuff that I'm talking about right now. You can do it DIY yourself with her information. So highly recommend Pia Silva. But and her company name is Badass Your Brand. So when we were doing this brand research, and it's really kind of like sitting in a room with your people and thinking about yourself, thinking about why you're successful, what makes you great, why do people keep coming to you? The word that kept on coming up over and over and over again was unexpected. We were looking at our TripAdvisor reviews and Google reviews and, just talking to the guides, and people said on almost every tour, somebody would say, this was totally unexpected. I did not expect this. I thought I was coming in for this, and this just blew my expectations out of the water. And it just felt like a lovely part of who we are and our ethos. And unexpected can be a bad thing, like especially when you're talking about a food tour, you could be like, oh, unexpected food tours, well, we're going to be eating chicken feet,
Salmonella.
Yeah, exactly. So unexpected can be a bad thing, but we felt like it fit into our ethos because our goal has always been to take the discomfort and make people comfortable with it. And we were like, well, yes, this is what we're doing. We truly are unexpected. You come into this experience, and we get people who like walk away feeling like they're friends, like they've built this community. Um, so it just fit our ethos, and we were able to get all of the domain names associated with it. And then we also trademarked it as well, which is, really huge, because you want to be able to trademark your name, so that you can protect it and other people can't use it.
So that's absolutely incredible. It really continues our theme of this entire discussion, which is of taking that risk to rebrand. I mean, were you nervous at all? The idea that you would lose your SEO, your domain name, the people that kind of already knew you. It was
Yeah, so we did it in a slow roll, and I would recommend this if you're rebranding. We didn't do it all at one time. I mean, what we did was it took us about a year and a half to fully deprecate all of our old things. And you can still find the term Atlanta Food Walks within our Unexpected Atlanta um, site. But I mean, basically, we started by adding a new email address, and then we added an umbrella website that had the Atlanta Food Walks website. Then over time, we deprecated the Atlanta Food Walks website so that it reverted back to Unexpected Atlanta. We changed our logos. Yeah, we did this, like I said, I mean, just a year and a half to really do this. I don't think we lost any customers. I don't think anybody, by the time it was done, it was just like, oh, okay, like they've been doing this for so long. I get it. Like yes, they used to be Atlanta Food Walks, now they're Unexpected Atlanta. No big deal.
Did you have any worries with OTAs and reviews and TripAdvisor and kind of listings and everything else?
No, again, we did all of that as a slow roll. Like everything that we did it as a slow roll. And the other thing that was really nice about it is our logos did not significantly change. We kept all of our brand colors, and we kept our general look of our logos. So it still felt very similar. And it just was kind of like a really easy shift over.
So I'm slightly worried that people are going to hear your story and think, well, I'm very different. I'm small. I'm just me and a guide, or me and my wife and my husband. And I'm wondering if you look back at kind of how you started and you look at a lot of new businesses, and I know you work with a lot of new businesses, and just even in an occasional way, just giving them so much advice, they sometimes get very excited and very hopeful by the idea of growth and scale. And I'm wondering if you have any advice and pitfalls to avoid in thinking about those terms and what they want out of their business.
That's such a great question. I love that question. So I started just with me in 2015, and um, and for the first year, it was just me. And then I hired um, two part-time guides. And then 6 months later, I hired a few more part-time guides. But really, for the first 3 years of the business, I was doing all the back office myself. I did not have any back office personnel. Um, and I think the same rule applies, in that whether you are, huge, or whether you're medium, or whether you're small, I think it is so important that when you're looking at your business, you're identifying the gaps and making sure that you are filling that gap. If it's just you, okay, and you are writing your scripts and you're performing your scripts, and you're, giving the tours and you're answering the phones and you're doing everything, then that's awesome. And then the moment that you have the tiniest bit of money, extra money, you can say, okay, wait a second. Which of these things do I really suck at where I need to fill that gap? Then you fill that gap first. And, again, this is what I was saying, in that I see myself as my zone of genius is writing. I think my zone of excellence, or maybe my zone of competence, is performing. And so the first thing I hired were performers, because I knew that, like, I can fill my zone of genius. So I look at scale and growth as something that isn't something that happens all at once. And I see this a lot, actually, even on the Tourpreneur page. People will be like, oh, I've got some money right now, I'm going to throw it into social media. I still don't have a social media person. I don't, because we don't make a ton of money through social media. Our primary marketing is through SEO instead, which is probably like a whole different conversation. Like, we could talk an hour and a half about SEO, because I love SEO.
Akila, how much did you block off for time here?
I love SEO, but anyway, the point on this is, I would say, really take growth and scale slowly. You don't need to hire, the moment that you have a tiny bit of money, just because X, Y, and Z out there is hiring a social media person, you might be phenomenal at social media. Then why would you be giving that away? Hire for the places where it is not in your zone of genius. Figure out what your zone of genius is, and hire for the places where you're sitting in your zone of competence or your zone of excellence. Maybe for you, the thing you really suck at is accounting, and the very first person you need to hire is an accountant. And that is going to be the best method to grow your business.
Well, I remember talking to you when I met you in Atlanta, and you made a very big point that an operator needs to know what they want out of this business, what their exit strategy is, where they're going, what their goal is for what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. If your goal is, I'm just doing this for fun, well, that's great, but then that's a hobby. And I know a lot of people, I know a lot of tour operators who, they're doing this for fun. They're having a great time, and that's awesome. It's like selling stuff on Etsy. It's a hobby. It's not your primary source of income. You're just kind of doing this on the side. And in that case, forget everything that I just said, because none of it matters to you. So, going in and saying, okay, am I creating a business that is going to be my primary source of income, as well as the primary source of income for employees? Or am I creating a hobby where I'm just making a little bit of extra money? I went into the business in 2015 knowing that this was going to be a business. I wanted this to be my primary source of income for me, as well as for my guides. And I also went into it knowing that at some point I wanted to exit. And this is another decision that you had to make, because as you're thinking about your strategy, especially if you've been an operator for, like, say, three years or longer, and you know how much revenue you're normally making, what's your end goal? Are you going to be doing this until you're 90? I hope not, because I can't imagine a 90-year-old tour guide. Although I did see that National Park Service has a 94-year-old tour guide. So
I was going to say, there's a whole article on her.
Yeah, exactly. So, so you could be doing this when you're 90. That could be a choice. A choice could be that when you're 65, you retire and you're like, you know what? I had a good run. I'm going to shut down my accounts and I'm done. And I've seen a lot of people do that. I've seen people say, you know what? My goal is, when I'm sick of this, I'm going to maybe sell this for a couple of $1,000 to somebody in my area who can continue it if they want to. If they don't want to, who cares? Or you can say, well, I want to make some serious money off of this. I want to make enough to at least partially fund a retirement. Then in that case, you've got a whole different set of strategies. And like, this is really about you and your financial plan. And I spend, on an annual basis, I create an annual business plan, and then I revisit that annual business plan at the end of every quarter as well to see where we are in meeting our goals, so that I also have a 5-year plan. And at the end of the 5 years, I'm like, okay, wait, have we met these goals? Where do we need to reassess? Because otherwise, I feel like sometimes people spin their wheels, and I do think it's hard if you don't know exactly what you want. And what I would love to see, if I were planning Arrival, what I would love to see Arrival do is have some of these more difficult conversations. These are hard questions. And they're questions that a lot of people don't like to talk about because it relates to money. But I think it's questions that are truly important, that matter, because it makes a big difference in whether your plan is to be a solopreneur or whether at some point you want to build a team and scale.
Well, I think also not only are they difficult, but they're far away. And so it's easy to forget about them because you're so busy working in the immediate term. And I know Peter Syme, and all of us at Tourpreneur love to talk about avoiding being a busy fool. You've got more bookings coming in. You've never been busier, and yet where are the profits?
Yeah.
Where are the kinds of profits that allow you to be a business, not only at scale, but to be a business that is paying for itself on the widest level, on the most zoomed out level of what you're doing as a business, investing in the future of growth, and not just, all right, we finished the year and I didn't lose money doing what I did. And I'm wondering, make any did you make any mistakes with the pricing of your tour? Did you learn any lessons along your way of how to understand these different levels of thinking about money, which is the tour price, which is so granular and immediate, and then also understanding what your costs are and what your profits want to be over the kind of longer and wider term?
So I think I mentioned very early on that I have an accounting degree. And so this is where
So no, you've never made a mistake.
yeah. So, the great thing about having an accounting degree is that I love numbers and I love spreadsheets. So I have a lot of spreadsheets, and, we're constantly calculating on every tour, what's our margins. Profitability is everything. You cannot focus on pure revenue alone. And as an industry, we've got to talk more about profit margins. So I'll be the first. I will tell you guys, if you are a tour company, I think, in my humble opinion, you really need to have at least a 5 to 10% net profit at your end of year, depending on your size. If you and by net, I mean this is after you pay yourself. Pay yourself a salary, people. Like, don't go into this and be like, oh, I'm just gonna have like whatever the drippings are at the end. Day one, you pay yourself a salary. You figure out what your salary is and you pay yourself a salary. And if you're not able to pay yourself a salary, then you have got to reduce your costs in your business. So this is all to say that, profitability is a huge goal of mine. I pay myself, I give myself salary bumps every year. We maintain, even during the pandemic, we maintained our 5 to 10% net profit percentage. But Mistakes, yeah, I make those all the time. I mean, didn't you hear me talk about the graveyard? We're constantly throwing stuff out. And one of my favorite people who you should absolutely have on a Tourpreneur podcast, because she is just a total rock star, is Avital Unger, with Avital Tours. And every time I see Avital, she's like, raise your prices. Literally, her first piece of advice to me every single time is raise your prices. And it's really good advice, because we get so into what we're doing, and we have these self-esteem issues like, will people like me even if I raise my price? And I swear to you, we are literally paying $800 for, a piece of metal that we carry around with some microchips in it, and nobody bats an eye. I mean, Teslas right now, I mean, people aren't even bargaining. They're going in and dropping like $100,000 on a car. Raise your prices. Raise your prices. Don't be worried. Raise your prices.
There's a lot of there's a lot of this is incredible. I mean, amen. I want to shout all sorts of things right now. There's a lot of operators who are terrified of that, because they're listed on OTAs that are filtering or sorting by prices, and they're worried they're going to lose bookings in the fight for the customer that is booking the lowest. And so, we do a lot of education, a lot of discussion in our individual coaching with operators on pricing for value. And I'm wondering what that means to you. In other words, how do you justify that what you're doing is worth this elevated price? So not only just getting over the internal psychological hurdle of knowing your worth, but also making sure that a customer understands that what they're paying for is worth this money.
Well, this goes back to storytelling, right? So you're not just storytelling on your tours, you're storytelling in sales as well. So your marketing and your sales and your website needs to be telling the story of the value of your enterprise, of your products. And there are going to be some people who come back and they're like, this is too expensive. I can't afford this. And that's okay. There are people who choose a Samsung over an iPhone too, and that's a price decision.
Who are they?
Who are they? I mean, and that's okay, but you have to know. And if you're going into it and you know that you're the budget, like, maybe your tour company is called Budget Tours, in which case you better be providing budget tours because you're competing on price. If you're going into it knowing that you're a luxury tour company, then again, you're competing on price, but in the opposite way. And maybe this is circling back to brand, in that you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. And if you know who you are, and then you know what your end goal is, and to me, the end goal is two things. Number one, I want to know at the beginning of the year, I figure out what salary I'm going to have by the end of the year. And number two, I want to figure out my net profitability for the end of the year. And then I back out those two numbers. And if you back out those two numbers, then you should know how much total revenue you need to make, right? So then once you know the total amount of revenue that you need to make, then you figure out the total number of guests that you need to have. And then you figure out what your price needs to be based on those guests. So to me, this is all just math. This is like, pricing is so easy. It's just math. I mean, it's math and self-confidence. And these are things that we learned back when we were in 8th grade.
We're editing this part out because people are terrified of pricing. Did you also, with your brand coach, not only discover who you are, but who your customer was?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a big part of the whole branding process, is delving deep into your customer. And, and one of the big things that we found were that our customers were not necessarily budget minded. They were people coming in for a vacation, and they weren't necessarily looking to spend the most money. They weren't maybe staying at the Four Seasons, but they were probably staying at a Hilton or a Marriott. And I think that hotels are a really good way to tell where your market is. Our customers were not staying at the at the Super 8 motel. They were staying at the Sheraton, the Ritz, the Hilton. We had a few on the upper end who were staying at the Ritz and the Four Seasons, but the bulk of them were kind of staying in that what I would call like a 4-star range. And so if they're staying in a 4-star range, then we need to be providing a 4-star experience. We're not going to be hitting, if they're staying in a 5-star hotel, then we need to be hitting that 5-star experience and pricing accordingly.
Does that mean you just talked to your guests and said, where are you staying? Because
Yeah.
that's brilliant market research. That
Yeah,
tells so
absolutely.
much. So much.
We this is a whole other conversation. But we have a very streamlined communication methodology. So we're currently using Tour app.
Tour App Go.
Yeah, Tour App Go. Yes, that's the name of it. Yes. And it's an automated text messaging system. But if you don't have the budget for that, y'all, like seriously, for 6 years, we were just hand texting every person on our tour before the tour, and we were providing information which was like, hey, reminder, meeting spot is here, here's this. And very frequently, and we would say, do you need any info on how to get to the start location? This is a really simple question, but you can gain so much information from this one question. If you ask somebody, do you need information on how to get to our start point? Then the very first question you have to ask them is, where are you staying? And they say, I'm staying at the Hilton. And then you say, well, do you want to take the Metro or do you want to take Uber? If they want to take the Metro, then you know that they're more budget conscious. If they want to take Uber, then they're not budget conscious. If they're renting a car, then you know that budget's not an issue for them. You can learn so much information just with this one series of questions. And then you just document that. And there you go. You know who your customers are.